good soul to everyone who's listening me like in the present, and also to those who will be watching me live on YouTube later on. I'm Ruchira from India, and I've participated in the Habitat Marte's Analog Virtual Mission 89. And in this particular mission, I'm responsible for Launch Center Facility. So let me quickly give you an overview about what I'll be talking through my presentation, starting with the internal design, the applied technologies. Then I'll be talking about the in situ resources on Mars, the organizational structure, astronaut profile and their duties, the resources that will be needed for a week, the guidelines to be provided to the other facilities or the entire station, also the protocols for 3D printing, protocols for entertainment, the technologies and the outputs that we could possibly apply to Earth, and the guidelines that we can follow on Earth, as well as the impacts to sustainable developmental goals. And lastly, there will be some references of the YouTube videos as well as the papers that I have referred for this presentation. So this is the picturization of the Habitat Marte Analog Space Station, which was designed by Yash Rathod in one of the virtual missions. And the facility has overall includes solar farm, and energy plant, then MOXIE, power station, engineering facility, greenhouse, health facility, main station, and the launch center. And in this particular presentation, I'll be talking about launch center. So before I actually begin with my presentation, there's an image which displays the landing sites for the missions that have happened so far. And if we can see, we can look for the Spirit, Curiosity, Opportunity rovers, as well as the Viking 1 and 2. Also, if we observe carefully, there's this particular region we can see between the two dark lines, which lies near the equator. Now, the specific reason for being near the equator is because obviously the sunlight that we'll receive is maximum at the equator, so it will be efficient for the solar panels that are on the instruments or the rovers, as well as it provides the low elevation, which allows atmospheric bending during the descent, that is during the flight of the rover or the lander, or even the spacecraft. Then the rock-free terrain, that is the lander is free of the rocks, and it allows us for an opportunity for soft landing. And we can see here the star-like dark structures, which are known as the dark streaks, where we are allowed to land or launch, but we'll need to take care of that before we land or launch. We need to sanitize those areas because there might be some, we can say, contamination present, and which can harm the instrument or the overall mission as well. So what is the role of the launch center? So I'd say there are three major roles, for starting with the spaceport. Now, for an example, even if we see on Earth, when we are moving from one place to another, we have stops or stations, as in, right, like the bus station or the railway stations. So spaceport will act similar, which will help us to receive ships and cargoes, as well as the people when we are traveling between Earth and Mars. Then also it will help us for the fueling of the ships, for the maintenance of the equipments which are on board, as well as for securing the ships and the rockets or the spacecrafts during the adverse condition, mostly like the dust storms, and also for the launch pad building and the maintenance. Second is the logistics, which will help us for the transportation and delivery of the cargo and coordinate the movement to the other parts of the habitat. Lastly, third is the mining. Now, this particularly won't be a major one, but I'd like to mention something about it. It will help us for generation of the water and the fuel, for the storage of the excavated materials and the products that we'll get from the Mars, as well as the transportation of these excavated materials and the products to the other locations on the habitat. In this slide particularly, I've highlighted the spaceport from India, which is Sriharikota. Now, talking about the internal design of the launch center, as we all know, the facility has a circumferential shape of 8 meters of the diameter and has 3 floors. And the facility holds for 4 astronauts. The very first level, we can see there's a kitchen and a dry lab. In the second, we have the garden, that is garden as in the vegetation area, as well as the sleeping pods. There's recreation and exercise place for the astronauts to rest, as well as to feel relaxed after the exhausting day on the mission. And also the most important thing is the uppermost room like the uppermost room holds the space for the firing room. Now, firing rooms are nothing but the control rooms. They are responsible for the pre-launch checks, booster checks, and the spacecraft checks. Once they have cleared the spacecraft for the launch tower or the pad, then the control is switched to the mission control center. Now we'll be talking about the technologies that we'll be using. So very first is the construction of the launch pad. To be very honest, if we are trying to construct an entire launch pad on Mars, it will be a very heavy task in terms of money, time, and efforts as well. So there are two possible ways that we can do it. First, we can see there's this, like all these three images are the picturization or the artistic depiction of how things could be. So in the very first, we see there's a red color landing pad deposited, and during the landing or launching, there are this deployable, I would say, we can see this inject fast. Below this, there are deployable rectangular cards which can be used. But the major problem with this is when we are landing or launching, the engine plumes during the finding, because the dust and the dirt will create damage. As we can see here, during the landing phase, there's the small dust and the dirt particles which are firing back, which can damage the instrument. So another option for like the launch pad construction would be the mobile launch pad, through which which is depicted here in these two images, where we can actually move the launch pad wherever it is necessary, which I think will be more efficient, and there will be less risk of damaging the instruments on board. The second technology is the reusable rockets. Of course, if we are like traveling from Earth to Mars or Mars to Earth, we'll be needing rockets to travel between Earth and Mars. Then we have, while we are considering a reusable rocket, we need to take care of the escape gravity of both the planets as well as the journey period, that is 6 to 9 months. Also, they should be able to withstand the dust storm, radiation, low temperature, and also we need to take care of the launch window construction as well. Then another thing that is very important in the applied technology is the fuel generation. So there are a lot of options as of now. Speaking of now, there's like solid, liquid, hybrid, and cryogenic fuels as well. But the ones that we can use for Mars missions or Mars atmosphere, I think, are solid and hybrid. Solid because they are simpler than the liquid systems, and the problem with solid fuel is that the temperature stability requires high energy demand. So we can opt hybrid as well. Hybrid has stable low temperature, and we can do multiple starts using the hybrid fuel. Then comes the communication system. As we were talking yesterday also throughout the sessions, like communicating through Mars is a major problem because it takes about 20 minutes of delay when a message is being like communicated from Earth to Mars or Mars to Earth. So we are all aware of the laser communication relay demonstration experiment, which was recently, like NASA had recently launched this experiment. So the that could be the potential solution to deal with the communications lag from Mars to Earth, because the infrared light used for laser communication differs from the radio waves, as the light packs are very packed tighter. That is, we can deliver more data at once. Laser communication will enable about 10 to 100 times more data transmitted than the current radio frequency systems. Now, the possible resources to generate from Mars, starting with the atmosphere regulation system. The system will have about 3 tanks consisting of the O2, CO2, and water. The CO2 is all, like we all know, is present in larger quantities on the atmosphere of the Mars, which will be absorbed by this tank. Then the water drills carried out by the rovers, in which they'll try to get the ice from the Mars subsurface or the surfaces, that will be absorbed by the second tank. And by the electrolysis of the both, we can get oxygen, which can be utilized by the crew which is living on Mars. Then there are solar power plants. Here we can see there are 8 solar power plants which are enclosed in the foldable arms, which will help us for the energy generation on Mars. Then Mars rock sizing. It's an instrument which will help us to size the rocks, slices into pieces, and these pieces can then be used for construction on site on Mars as well. And then there's iron production plant. We know there's abundance of iron on Mars, so that this will help us to produce the iron from the ferrous ores that are mixed with the Martian soil. And in situ propellant plant. If you're talking about launch pads, that means we are going to launch something. And if you're going to launch something, we'll be needing fuel or propellant. So to generate the fuel or propellant, we can install this plants, which propellant plants, which will help, which will use the carbon dioxide present in the atmosphere. And by the electrolysis of this, we can combine the H with the CO2 and we can generate methanol, which can be used as a propellant for the future missions on Mars. And as well, we are aware of MOXIE, which is one of the missions of NASA to generate oxygen for the crew on Mars. So second motive behind MOXIE is also to try to generate fuel using fuel that will be oxygen, so that we can power the future missions that will be conducting on Mars. Now, talking about the organization structure, firstly, we have the launch commander. He will be the head of the launch team and responsible for making the final go or no-go decision. Then we have the launch and the logistic managers who will be monitoring and overseeing the launch processing systems, which is a highly automated computer controlled system. Then we have the engineer and the technician who will be responsible for the pre-launch testing and the testing of the external tank or the boosters or even the ground support system or the equipments. And then we have the rotating astronaut. That is anyone from the other facilities would keep in rolling and check in about what other things are going on in this facility. So we have rotating astronaut. Now the astronaut profiles and the duties. As the launch commander, he'll act as the crew commander, that is the head of the crew, and the prerequisites for that are he should be a trained astronaut, excellent managemental skills, mechanical, electrical, or aeronautical engineer with 10+ years of work experience. And the duties that he'll be performing will be managing the habitat or the facility operations, preparing briefings and meetings, mediating among the team members, managing an evaluation of the emergency situations, and he will be the primary communicator with the mission control center. Then we have the launching and logistics engineer will be the lead space engineer in the facility, and the prerequisites are he should be again a trained astronaut, a mechanical, electrical, or an aeronautical engineer with a 7 years of work experience in the engineering technology. His duties will be to troubleshoot and repair systems in timely manner to ensure the mission readiness, work to improve reliability and recycle efficiency, reliable use of the resources. This includes writing and implementing preventive maintenance procedures and routines and developing design improvements. Then we have the technician, or whose prerequisites would be again a trained astronaut, mechanical, electrical, or an aeronautical engineer with 5+ years of experience in electrical or electronic sector. Now he will be mostly assisting in the development, drawing, design, documentation, and report of the project, and provide support and direction during the construction and activation of the power distribution of the equipment. Next, talking about the astronaut training program. We can sum up the astronaut training program into the 4 major categories, starting with the technical training, management training, survival training, and the vehicle training. Technical training, in this, the astronauts are trained for safety and maintenance procedures and to handle the control systems, to handle the laboratory equipments and their analysis, as well as the ability to try and use the equipments which are there present. Then in the management training program, they are trained for the resources and the project management. They should have leadership and communication skills, teamwork, and adaptability. In the survival training, which I think is the most important part, where they are trained for the basic medical training, which they can assist in the case of emergencies. They're also trained for the camping, swimming, microgravity, and buoyancy training. Lastly is the vehicle training. Of course, during the extravehicular activities, we'll need to use rovers or the vehicles which are designed for the particular purpose. So we should be, like an astronaut should be able to use those instruments or the vehicles effectively. So they are provided with that training, also with the training of launch vehicle operations and landing and launching procedures. Resources needed for 1 week by the individual person. So food and snacks, around 500 to 800 grams per astronaut. 3,200 calories will be the count. Water for drinking and food preparation, about 2 to 2.5 liters per astronaut. Water for bath and other purposes, about 2.5 liters per astronaut again. And water for vertical garden or farm will depend upon the size of the farm which we have designed for. Then power consumption is again 30 to 40 kilowatts, and oxygen consumption is 100 to 1000 grams. Now here is a meal chart for the entire week, which the astronauts could follow during their mission. Now, whenever like the meal is designed for a week or so, it's made sure that the astronauts consume 3 meals a day, including the breakfast, lunch, and dinner, and ensure that it provides them with the balanced supply of vitamins and minerals. Now, protocols for 3D printing. 3D printing, I would say, is the revolutionizing technology which we are using, because it has reduced our work a lot, because carrying everything from Earth to ISS or to any deep space mission would be a very tedious task to do, because there are a lot of things that come in consideration when we have to take things from Earth to other missions. So 3D printing will help us in building structures that are difficult to build and transport from Earth, creating replacement components, using resources on planetary surfaces, that is, and the material that Mars, like instead of the ABS plastic, which is used for 3D printing, we could go for the extracted basalt, which will provide the excellent tensile strength for our robotic arms or the future components that we'll be building. Also, the challenges with 3D printing are that we need to take in consideration their behavior in the vacuum and thermal effects, like fully automation, the quality and the quality of the product that will be produced by using 3D printing, and also about the power requirements, that the power we'll be needing for using the 3D printer. So the protocols for 3D printing are: one should examine the various technologies available and currently in development, consider the possible impacts for crewed space operation and robotic spacecraft operation, discuss government industry investments in the technological development, make recommendations for future research, suggest objectives for an additive manufacturing roadmap, and envision opportunities for cooperation and joint development. Now, protocols specific to the launch center. There are 2 major protocols that everyone in the launch center needs to follow, starting with the departmental protocols and the machinery protocols. In the department, they need to be aware of the development and circulate the mission plan and discuss in depth about the plan or the entire routine that they have for the day. Then they should follow the instruction manual. They should maintain the usage of each instrument and also report the chief with the daily progress of the given task. Then comes the machinery protocol, wherein they should know how to use the machines, indicate the do's and don'ts, should check the warning systems and regulate and calibrate the instruments, and also check the instruments for accuracy, and also take care of the sensors. Guidelines to be provided to other facilities. They must be available 24/7 to support in case there is any emergency or any breach in the facility or in the station. They should ensure a clear and distinct continuous communication among the facilities. Like being away in isolated environment, communication is the only thing which will help the people going on with their missions. So a clear communication would be very helpful. Must monitor the crew interactions and follow the protocols and the guidelines. They must keep the habitat clean and organized, because the environment we work clearly affects our work. So we should ensure that the surroundings should be clean and organized. They must report the outcome of each experiment to the mission control. The report should be given to the mission control so that other facilities are also aware of what things are going on in the respective facilities. They must carefully handle the laboratory equipment, and the rovers must regularly do the medical checks and do the exercise in gym. They must cooperate with the fellow crew and work together as a team, and must maintain the integrity and enjoy their life on Mars. Now, protocols of safety: if there's any emergency, they should not panic. They should stay calm, because they're trained for such situations and they can think wisely and come up for a solution. They should wear their space suits or the EVA suits immediately in case of breach, or whenever they're going out for performing the EVA. Ensure that the gas sensors or the instruments and all the technical stuffs are functioning well. They should not eat or sleep in the laboratory or the control room, because a slight piece or any tiny damage can actually jeopardize the entire mission. So now the protocols for entertainment. While they are in the isolated environment, they can share their emotions and feelings. Whenever they feel like they want to talk, they can watch movies or listen to the music. They can play games that are feasible within the habitat. they can have at least one meal together so that they can sit together, talk about their day or discuss about what happened throughout their day, which helps a lot. And then celebrate festivals, cook favorite meals during their special occasion, and most importantly, exercise regularly and practice meditation or yoga. Now, technologies and outputs that could be applied to Earth. Now, as I mentioned in the very first slide about the deployable launching pads or the mobile launching pads that can be used on Earth as well. Then the energy and the power consumption technologies, which will help us to cut down the unnecessary consumption of energy and power. Then the improved efficiency robotic swarms for research. We can use these robotic swarms where humans cannot go into the environments which are hazardous for humans. Then increase reusability and reliability. We can apply this principle in every particular thing that we do. We can increase the reusability and reliability of the system. And lastly, the use of water management technology system. Guidelines to be applied to the daily life on Earth. We can apply the 3 R's, that is the recycle, reduce, and reuse, and also adapt to whatever situations we are facing with and try to come up for the better solutions. We can consume the least resources as possible. We can attempt to minimize the technological impact or the carbon footprint. We can go and promote local use of the as well as we can use more technology that is green and follows the sustainability protocols. Lastly, the impacts of sustainable development goals. I'll be talking about these 8, that is the decent work and economic growth, then industry, innovation and infrastructure, sustainable cities and communities, responsible consumption, affordable and clean energy, and participation for the goals. Herein, we can maximize the usage of the renewable sources and thus save the dependency on the non-renewable resources. Improved efficiency in construction and advancement of the technologies will help a lot. Consideration for social, economic, environmental impact without compromising the ability of the future generations. Optimizingly use the available resources and maximize the output. Promote use of the renewable resources, which is cheap and clean, and promoting the mankind to provide safe and friendly planet. So the generation of the Mars would be nourishing with a nourishing well-being, a thriving people, and with healthy planet. These are some references of the videos which you can watch for the astronaut training purposes. And these are the references of the literature that I have referred to while creating this PPT. You can contact me at the following links. And that's all from my side. Thank you.